From WXXI News, I'm Matt DeTurk, Artistic Director at the Little Theater, filling in today for Evan Dawson, and this is Connections. In the new thriller film Drop, a widowed mother named Violet goes on her first date in years. The date takes a terrifying turn when she's bombarded with anonymous, threatening messages on her phone during the upscale dinner, leaving her questioning who is behind the harassment. Drop is now playing in theaters thanks to Universal Pictures, and joining me here in the studio are screenwriters Jillian Jacobs and Chris Roach, who moved from Los Angeles to Rochester in 2021. Thank you so much for being here, and congrats on the success of the film.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So it's in its second week of release.
Yes.
It's doing well worldwide in that case, which is always, I think, both a great indicator of current box office, but also to the testament of the story and the fact that audiences seem to really be responding to it. I saw that, it was like huge in Mexico this past weekend.
I didn't see that. Okay, good to know. Yeah.
I want to start with just kind of like the kernel of the idea. Like, where did the idea for Drop come from?
Go ahead.
The original idea actually came from two of the producers. Not really the story, but the idea of airdrops being a threatening thing that could make a good movie. They were in Italy and at a dinner, and someone was sending them Shrek memes.
Over airdrop.
So
So they knew it was someone at the restaurant, but they couldn't figure out who it was.
They couldn't-
And it was like a game they started playing at their dinner, and it just took up their whole evening. And then they were like, that was kind of interesting. Like, could that be something?
yeah, theirs were non-threatening. They were just goofy.
They were just ridiculous Shrek memes.
Phew.
But they, we had one of the producers was an actor in a movie we wrote called Truth or Dare in 2018, and they had wanted to find a project with us, and they came back and they said, "This happened. Is there a movie with airdrops?" And we thought maybe there is. So we got to work, and our original idea had a lot of similar things in it. However, it all took place at a hotel, and it was too spread out, and it was sort of hard to really focus in. But there was a dinner scene, and then we said, could we just make this all a dinner? Is there enough?
And then it was sort of like, okay, well, how can you already make the dinner kind of tense or nerve-wracking? And that's like a first date, it's so universal. And what kind of character would that be even scarier for? And that's, how we came up with Violet and, being a single mom and a widow and everything. So it just kind of snowballed.
Yeah, I have so many directions that I want to go in the conversation with this. But for anyone who is listening, if you have a question for our guests, you can call 844-295-TALK. In Rochester, the number is 585-263-9994. Or you can comment on Connections on the WXXI YouTube news channel. So you just mentioned the universalness of it. One of the things that I really love about the film is I think that there's a real balance between the modern and the classic in it. Things that, again, feel very much like a common universal experience, but then also you've put such a modern twist on it. Phones are something that I want to focus on a second here, because
Sure.
I was doing some research and I was knew of but was surprised how common phones are in horror, I think, in that case. Iconically at the beginning of Scream, but then also Black Christmas is so
right.
terrifying in that case. So I want to take just a quick second and I want to play a quote from lead actress Megan Fahey talking about a bit about her character receiving a sudden phone message.
This idea that it's totally within the world we live in, that you can receive a message like that unsolicited from a person that you don't know, and you can look around a room, as she does in the film, and see everybody in it on their phone and have even less of an idea of who it could be. And so I think that that's actually a really effective part of the way that the film is shot, because it's so the world that we live in.
So how, in effect, did you try to find a way in writing this to make it both that a phone connects us to other people, but also in Drop specifically is so isolating and so terrifying?
Right.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you mentioned those other films like Scream and Black Christmas, because I think one of the challenges as a screenwriter, especially working in horror thriller, as technologies get better, certain things that worked before don't work. So, in the old days, it could be like someone's cut the phone line and now I'm completely isolated. So, but there is something about our cell phones and being glued to our phones that is isolating. And, all of us are kind of every day in our own world. And we don't, we're both guilty of it, and everyone is. And you don't know what's internally happening. And I think that lended itself well for this character because, she could almost just like, she's being rude, she's worried about her kid, she's whatever, but there's this whole world that only she's privy to on her phone, which is something we all experience, just not in an intense way.
Yeah. I think it was also just a really fun way to make it, literally the tagline is like everyone's a suspect, and it's like you go anywhere and everyone's staring at their phones, and so that was something we really definitely wanted to utilize to our advantage, is just to really just show the prevalence of these things and how it if you don't know who it is, like, how are you gonna figure it out, and it literally could be anybody within this range. So that's what was fun about airdrops too, because I'm sure maybe you'll get into this, but like texting in movies and as like a threatening thing, that's obviously been used a lot. But what we liked about this was that with an airdrop, the person is within a certain range. So that was fun too, was just getting to use the space in that way.
Yeah, and I think it's that uncertainty of what's on the other end is what continues. Like, weirdly, like I was thinking about the fact that, again, so much of, like, let's call it earlier phone technology, again, is audio based in that case. And when I was actually looking at pulling clips of the film for this episode, I kind of had a hard time with it because so much of the phone interaction in this case is text based and silent. And what is that like writing for that?
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely, like, when we were writing it, something that we were a little concerned about, that we wanted to obviously like make the person feel like a character, but also not just have like a ton of shots of her looking at her phone kind of thing, like throughout. And I know Chris, the director, Chris Landon, knew right away. I think he knew that he didn't want to be cutting to her phone or anything. So that's why, that's the reason for the text on the screen. And I think they really set up shots in a lot of ways to really make the text, like, they knew exactly where they would have it to make it look like it was oppressive to her in this space. But it was definitely something we were very aware of.
Yeah, I mean, one fun thing we did with the script, which I've never done in a screenplay, is we created the memes and put them in the screenplay.
Yeah, like before it starts getting to like the texting messages, when she's first just getting the memes. And so we would create the memes and send them to each other.
Yeah.
And be like, does this work? Try all kinds of different memes.
Yeah, there's so many classic memes now. And
yeah.
You can do meme generators online and have them say anything, and some of them were ridiculous, but it ended up working.
Yeah.
Did you mentioned that obviously the initial kernel came from airdropping, and of course I think that the proximity aspect is what makes that so unique and so interesting. But was there at any point a sense of you wanting to be like, oh, what if we convert this to text messages, or what if we change the technology, or even change how airdropping works? Like, I feel like, without getting into the specifics that I don't know of understanding how the technology actually works in that case, was there a sense of you wanted to be like, oh, let's make this less realistic or something?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely knew that Apple, the actual airdrops would not end up being the technology.
Right,
So that was obviously, I think we knew that we could sort of fudge it a little bit to be what we needed it to be.
Yeah, I mean, in the script, one thing you can do is, like, on an iPhone, you can write a note in the Note app and airdrop that. Mm-hmm. So I think in the script it said they were sending, the bad guy would be sending notes as opposed to text message. But then I think for efficiency, when they made the movie, they call it DigiDrop, and it just has a text messaging part of it as well. Which,
I think that probably just made it cleaner and everything too. Yeah. But when we were writing it, we definitely were,
trying to make it as realistic as possible.
Yeah.
It feels like it. And I think I was very surprised watching the film that I was like, oh, yeah, these are real memes. Like, it's not like they invented a Hollywood version of something to skirt around that. I was like, oh, no, this is literally the world we're living in this case. So I love hearing that, like, you actually were testing them out and sending them back and forth.
Yeah. And I mean, we obviously were like, we don't know if any of these are going to stay, but these are ones that people recognize that could get the point across. But yeah, we would be like airdropping each other in our house also to see like how far away you could be and that kind of thing. And, changing the messages on them just to, get them exactly right. But that was fun.
Yeah. Had you dealt in previous works with other like had you dealt with technology in such a prevalent way in like previous your writings?
I did. Before we started writing together, I co-wrote a movie called Nonstop, which has Liam Neeson, and it's on a plane. And it came out in 2014, but I wrote it with someone else in 2011, and it was really when planes started getting Wi-Fi. And so our idea was, can this be used in a movie where it's similar in a way, someone you don't know on the plane is communicating with this air marshal and and threatening the air marshal and the passengers on the plane. So that was kind of the first time I did that. And it's, it's fun to utilize these technologies, and they're so quickly changing that when you have an idea, it's kind of a limited window.
Yeah, I actually even think like the AirDrop technology on iPhones is like there's like a different format to it now. I think when we were writing this, it had really started to become a thing that people recognize that like when you're on a train or out in public, like I feel like it's like teens sending people random, things. Like it was starting to become a thing. So I think by the time it got made, Apple was obviously like we need to, make it so that it's not as, easy to send strangers random things.
Yeah, I got my first one in March. I don't know what my settings were set to at that point, but literally this past March, and I was like, "What is happening?"
Yeah, it's still never happened to me, but it happened to some of the actors apparently, various times. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think probably, especially if you're like in New York City or Chicago, where there's a ton of people around all the time.
I've heard of it happening on planes too.
I wasn't on a plane, but I was in a, let's call it a contained area with a lot of people. And so, was like really surprised by it. That sense again of like the current technology, like, did you at any point think while writing it, like, oh, this isn't going to hold up because like this technology might go away or something?
Yeah, I think we were definitely like, this has to go quickly or else it's going to be, it's going to be obsolete or something.
Like with any movie getting made, there's so much anxiety. There's so many things that could prevent it from getting made, right? And so during the process, even though we got very lucky and Christopher Landon came aboard pretty quickly and everyone seemed interested, there's always that like, okay, this one thing is going to make it fall apart. And I remember us talking, being like, they got to make it because in 2 years, airdropping is probably not even going to be a thing.
Yeah, like that's literally my question. Like, I feel like, because I was surprised watching it and being like, oh, this is of now.
Right. Yes. Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
With that then, as both like talking about like both previous works you've worked on or maybe even looking ahead to the future sort of a situation. I mentioned in the previous hour, and I hate that I'm talking about Minecraft so much, but like,
hey, we just saw it.
So like, a Minecraft movie has been doing crazy numbers in that case. And I think like, as we look beyond cell phones in that case to like Twitch streaming or like TikTok influencers or anything, do you think that like part of what is connecting with audiences, both in terms of Minecraft, in terms of Drop, is the fact that these are actually modern stories that are reflecting like modern days and people feel familiar with what they're seeing? Not to keep going off on a tangent there, but like, listen, I love The Lord of the Rings and I'm not at all going to be like disparaging to The Lord of the Rings in that case, but like, oh, that's not my reality. Like, and I love that it's escapism, but I feel like Drop again works because it's like so current. Like, do you feel like other technologies need to be represented for audiences to like connect to it, to modern films?
I mean, clearly, IP exists because people are connecting to something, right? Like we saw the Minecraft movie, which we actually both liked.
Awesome. I haven't seen it. So.
It's pretty funny.
But we have an 8-year-old who knows Minecraft, and that's why we saw it. And I think, I think people want to have some connection to something, So if it's IP, whether it's Marvel or Minecraft, it's like that makes me feel something, whether I'm a kid and it's just part of my identity, or I'm an adult and I feel nostalgia for it. So I do think, I think with Drop, which, truthfully, like, we're happy it came out. We wish it would do better at the box office, but it's very hard for,
quote unquote original things.
movies. But, I think that's why we like the first date aspect of it even more than the airdropping, because that's a universal thing that people experience.
Yeah, agreed. And I think, I feel like people were so surprised at how well Minecraft did, but it's like, if you have a kid, you're like, of course it's going to do well, because kids love it. And then there's, young adults who grew up with it. And, there's so many properties that get made into movies that are geared towards our age, the nostalgia there. And obviously Mario kind of hit both.
Yeah.
But I think there hasn't been as many things that are just for this like younger generation. I think that's really why they were just really starved for something that they knew, that they love, that, feels like it's for them.
Yeah.
I think that's why that did really well.
Absolutely. I think there's been such interesting discussions about the fact that it'd be like, oh, instead of like repurposing, like, here's another Indiana Jones, which isn't really in that case targeted at like current kids. It's really more for, again, people who felt nostalgic for the originals, or even to some extent certain aspects of Star Wars in that case. But like my nephew,
Ghostbusters, even
yes,
the new Ghostbusters don't necessarily feel like they're for kids. Not that the original was necessarily for kids either,
Right,
but
yeah.
it definitely is like, this is for the people who grew up with Ghostbusters.
Yeah. And I not to keep bringing it back to phones, but like I think that that's also the thing that like as an elder millennial at this point, like I feel like as technology has been changing, I'm starting to finally feel that sense of like, do I want to join another social network? Like, do I really even at this point want a smartphone? I do. But like, I feel like there is that sense of worrying about like both our addiction to it, but also how we are perceived by other people and by society in that case.
Yeah.
The question I like quickly have to like pull off of something else which is the restaurant production design in this film is gorgeous.
Yeah, it's
just
fantastic.
Like the tunnel going into it is amazing.
Yes.
Were you, because the fact that like the restaurant is mostly 3 rooms in that case, like the like hostess stand, the restaurant, and then the bathroom, were you ever tempted in working on this to expand that scope? I know that it bookended both sides, like outside the restaurant, but still.
You mean expand like the actual like setting?
Yeah, like the footprint of it. Yeah.
I think it actually ended up looking a lot like how we had written it, I think,
cool.
because, it is one of those things where you do need it to be and want it to be kind of in its own contained space. And Chris Landon, the director, he in production added the tunnel, the hallway that she goes in, that obviously is just so fantastic. It's like a Dorothy walking into Oz kind of moment, and he really wanted to like separate the hostess stand and everything. But whereas where the bar was, the fact that it, they were right up against the windows, that was all pretty much how we had envisioned it.
I think in an early draft we had her go into the kitchen at one point.
Oh, right.
Just because we were looking for ways of how do you give her something else to do in the space that's not just sitting at the table.
No, of course.
But yeah, for the most part, it was pretty much what could we do realistically, in a restaurant setting. Like originally we were like, does it have 2 levels? But then it sort of becomes, the challenge is how do you make a movie at dinner?
Yeah.
It's exciting and thrilling.
And also make it seem like she actually has a shot to figure out who it is,
Yeah.
If it gets to be too large, it's sort of like, okay, well then, if you can't even see everybody. But yeah, it was just, I think keeping it in like that one large room for the most part really kind of helped make it tense, because she's in this space, but she's kind of trapped within it,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, again, like as you built in like these little other side characters who we kind of gradually get to know over the course of it. And by side characters, I mean almost suspects throughout the course of it. But I loved the relationship that Violet has with the bartender. I think is established so quickly and so deeply in that case that like immediately I was like, I'm invested. Like,
I love that.
Like whichever direction that goes, I'm very invested in their
good.
relationship. How did like writing that or like developing that come about?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely one of the parts of the movie that I am really proud of that's still in there. I mean, we always had Violet going to the bar before Henry shows up, so we liked the idea that she was alone when she got the first drops and everything. But yeah, we always envisioned the bartender as a suspect, I guess. But what I just really love that she ends up just kind of being like a real girl's girl, and it's like these. Well, spoiler alert. But I think early on in one of the drafts too, there was like some with notes with producers. It was like, how can we make this more surprising, and maybe the bartender's in on it, and it just didn't feel right. Like her character is just I don't know. I just think it's a fun relationship you don't really get to see very much on screen. So yeah, I'm glad with how that worked out.
That's a friend of mine who is a barista, like was talking about like that sense of like feeling like immediately like, over time you get your favorites, you get your regulars sort of a situation. It's just naturally how that goes. Mm-hmm. But like that connection in Drop was so immediate, and like you immediately felt like, oh, they're on the same team. Yeah, no spoilers for the ending, but but at least at the beginning, like they're on the same team in that case. I think that was like so beautifully put together.
Thank you.
I also just liked Violet, comes from a history of abuse, and this bartender sees people's interactions and could sense the abuse that Violet was going through. She really was going through. Now, she thought it maybe was a bad date, which she's seen a million times probably, but just that she's aware of things like that and wants to help and wants to take care of, people. We really, really thought.
It felt like a realistic character, but also, again, just, a character or a relationship that's really just sort of based in like feminine camaraderie. It's like how girls will go in the bathroom at a restaurant or wherever and just make friends, like we're that like, it's just that cliche, but I feel like that's how most women are, but you don't always get to see that.
Do you find that like, as you're writing, you're trying to like pull these from like experiences that you've personally experienced, or are you trying to pull like things from like your friends in, or just generally just writing a good story regardless?
I mean, sometimes it just sort of depends, I think, on what seems to fit within the realm of what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Because I feel like, again, like, talking about like, I was, I like the balance of like trying to play with tropes, go against tropes sort of a situation. But yes, there's the group of younger women at one point who are in the bathroom with Violet or whatever. And I thought it was so interesting that they were very suspicious of her, as they should be, because she's acting weird. But at the same time, they absolutely were like, yep, like, here's my makeup that you can like share and everything. And I was like, I thought that felt very lived in.
Yeah.
Like,
good. Yeah. I mean, I think obviously, this is a movie about going on a date and going to a restaurant. And lucky for us, we do that a lot. So, and I think that's another thing about the universality of it is just everyone, knows the beats of being on a date and going to dinner and all these, things that we've all experienced. So I think that is also just what makes it, feel more lived in.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other like restaurant specific questions I want to know is that, did you in the writing of it specifically are like, these are the drinks they're ordering, these are the food dishes they're ordering? Like, how specific did you get for like a culinary world?
Well, yeah, we did. I mean, a lot of it was just giving the waiter dialogue.
Yeah.
So she could, deal with the airdrops. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the things, like in the first draft, when he's talking about the specials and he says like the Alaskan lobster or whatever.
South African lobster.
South African lobster. Those were all in there.
Yeah, Chris had written that whole speech basically where he's going down the specials like pretty early on, I would say, and it never really changed.
Yeah.
I think Violet's salad was like slightly tweaked. I think we had her order like a salmon salad, but yeah, the like the wine and everything like that. But yeah, I mean, I think Chris was just enjoying writing this kind of like kooky waiter who's just being very extra.
Yes.
So yeah, and to give Violet time to deal with what she's dealing with. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, it was all pretty specific.
Did in that case. I know I'm jumping around in production process in this case, but like in that case, when they were actually like then shooting it, filming it, like having the food styled, did they ask you about like what were you envisioning for the food or drink in this case? Like,
No, I think by that, we worked so closely with the director on the script that I think, by that point, that was just his ball game. So he, I guess if he felt like changing something, like Jill said, he would change the salad, but so much of it was just, what we had in there and just went forward.
yeah, no, absolutely. We're going to take a short break, but when we come back, I have lots more questions about Drop
Fantastic.
With our guests, screenwriters Jillian Jacobs and Chris Roach.
Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Mary Cariola Center, proud supporter of Connections with Evan Dawson, believing an informed and engaged community is a connected one. marycariola.org.
We're back from the break. This is Connections. I'm Matt DeTurk, sitting in for Evan Dawson. We are talking about the new movie Drop, now playing in theaters, written by Jillian Jacobs and Chris Roach, who are joining me today in the studio. One of the things I think that is, again, cool is that like seeing from like taking from the script, going to the actual film in that case is Christopher Landon, the director, I think has been building such a really cool body of work. I hate to just say it's just cool, but like
It is, yeah, for sure.
I-
It's very stylish and poppy.
Yeah, I just literally within the last month watched Happy Death Day to You, Freaky. Wasn't even intending to lead up to this moment in that case. I know, right? But my spouse is like a huge horror fan in that case, and he was like, "Oh, this is a blind spot. We need to catch up in this case."
Nice.
So really cool in this case that it just built up to then naturally we went and saw Drop.
Love
So,
it.
Nice.
Yes.
You mentioned right before the break a little bit about the waiter in that case. Chris Landon, I think, has been interesting as a queer director, has been, at least in his last several movies, probably also earlier, which I haven't gotten to yet, been adding in some queer representation and some queer characters. So I'm curious in that case if the waiter, as you wrote, was meant to kind of fill that role in that case, or that's just how Chris spun it out in that case.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, we,
We
I
definitely
think
didn't specify.
we, unless it's something important about the character, we sort of don't get into it because we feel like the director should have the freedom to cast anyone they want in roles, whether it's, their diversity or that. And I think it was probably he just wanted someone who was really funny, and Jeffrey's amazing.
Yeah, he's so
who
great.
plays the waiter, and
Yeah, I think he just had a really hilarious self-tape, and Chris, I think, he watched it and was howling and basically was like, all right, call off the search because, yeah, Jeffrey he's just so funny, and he was improvising a bunch of stuff, I think, too, but...
Yeah, but we try not to describe even body types or anything, just so, people can imagine when they read it, whoever they want.
Yeah, and also just when the casting process is happening, that it's not too closed off, and unless it's really important. But yeah, so Chris, that was definitely Chris's find for sure.
Yeah, and how did your interactions in effect go with him? Did you have interactions with him as a director from you completing the script through actually now that it's released? How did your working relations with him go?
We worked with him mostly as leading up to production and everything, doing he would have notes for us, and we would do the notes, talk about them with him, and really it was very collaborative. He was always had really good ideas, always just really trying to make sure we were constantly upping the tension and the surprises throughout, and just really every draft trying to make it tighter, more exciting, more satisfying. So we really did a lot of that with him, and then they shot in Ireland.
Oh wow!
They built that whole restaurant on a stage.
I guess that makes sense,
in
but also
Ireland.
wow.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. But that also really allowed him to do all those really fun camera flourishes, because they had full control of the set. But we didn't end up going to set. We have 2 young kids, so yeah, we didn't continue on really past that point. But
the script was
yeah,
done at that
it was
point.
pretty much done.
But
yeah.
he's very generous. He's a a writer. He was a writer before he was a director. And, I think in a lot of situations like this, a director could, once the script is sold, could just take it themselves and say, okay, now I'm going to do it this way. But he didn't. He didn't kick us off. He worked with us the whole time. And, he luckily really liked our first draft and then helped us craft the changes he wanted. And we've actually worked with him on a new script now. Like, he's very cool. And
Yeah, he was really collaborative and smart, and I feel like we both learned a lot just working with him through the notes and everything. So it was a great experience.
That's awesome. Have you, not to name any names on any previous things, but have you found that like that going back and forth from either director notes or producer notes has been something that's been common, or like kind of, Chris, as you said, like just it's more been like, up, it's sold, we're done, we'll see it later when it comes out?
Depends on the project.
Yeah, it can vary. Like I mentioned, Nonstop, which was the first script I ever sold, and once we sold it, that Liam Neeson got on board on our draft, but then the director took over and hired a writer he had worked with to do a production draft. And which is understandable. It was the first thing I'd ever written, and then we've every project's different, but I think, what was great about working with Chris is he knows what it's like to be a writer. His first big movie that he wrote was Disturbia, which is also sort of Hitchcockian thriller. So he's been in our shoes, and he was also just amazing to learn from because he's got such great ideas and he knows how to make things cinematic.
Yeah, I think that balance again is what like really works so well in this case, and I think that's so fun to hear that it was like a good collaboration. And like like I know that not firsthand, but like through the general stories of Hollywood productions, that is not always the case.
For sure, yeah.
But no, I think that's really great, and I think that balance of tone and styles is like partly what works so well in this. Partly wise in that case, I'd like to play a clip from the trailer because it kind of, again, I feel like echoes back to a little bit of the multiple styles going on in this.
Hey.
Hi. Sorry, I got a drink because I was nervous.
I had a couple in the car on the way over. Can't believe we're actually doing this.
I mean, you are the first guy who didn't ask for feet pics.
It's a second date thing. Everything okay?
Somebody sent me this.
It's just dumb kids trying to mess with you.
It's weird.
I mean, who do you think it is?
Oh, I don't know.
We can figure this out. I think you gotta be within 50 feet to send a drop. So, it's someone in the restaurant. Violet, everything okay?
I never thought that listen, I have anxiety from when my phone goes off, but like now after this, like the noise, I'm just like, no.
It's like Jaws, you won't go back in the water.
Sorry, everyone. This is why I'm no longer returning my texts. So it's fine.
I would
That's the
never
excuse.
presume to be as impactful as Jaws, by the way. So,
or get people to put their phones down.
yeah.
Like, which is, I think, a tough ask at this point.
Yes.
Kind of like taking that, but going to the flip side of the coin, though, is we did mention briefly earlier that there is actually a through line about trauma throughout the film. But it's also, I feel like it's about abuse. It's about trust of other humans. And again, not trying to go into spoilers here, but there's a really beautiful scene deep in the film where Violet and Henry are both at the table and sharing feelings about regret over hurting other people. That I feel like feels like such a culmination of pulling together of all the threads that you've woven so far. Can you talk about maybe a little bit about how that scene like came to pass? Because it's such a different moment from other parts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, we had always from the very first draft sort of, wanted to lean into this idea of Violet's history, and why is she a single mom? Why is she in this position? And who is she who is someone that would be in this position that maybe has a past that could come back to haunt her? So there was always a version of that. And and I think the thing Chris did that really elevated it is it was sort of more about her originally, and her sort of guilt she felt about exposing her son to that abusive relationship was always there. And Henry's trauma, or what he was going through, was more of an afterthought, more of something we were holding back. And I think, that was one of the last changes to the script, and Chris added in Henry sort of giving his point of view. And I think it made it an even more impactful scene because they're both secretly dealing with these things, but also wanting to share with each other, which is, the foundation of what will hopefully be a good relationship for them.
It really tied together, I think, Henry's story and what's going on with him and what's going on with her, and it was this moment of connection, even though they both can't quite say what's happening. But yeah, I think a lot of people have mentioned that scene as just being really impactful to them, and it was always meant to be like, because it's also sort of at this part of the movie where she kind of is getting to have no choice, and she's going to have to make a decision on what to do, so it makes it even harder.
That was the other thing that we always wanted in there, was for her to have this connection of, I really like this guy. This is a guy I could trust, but now I have to kill him.
Yeah. And I have to say, throughout the course of this, like, he is a saint.
God. Yeah, it's true. Yes.
That was an early note we got from the producers of like, why isn't this guy left yet? And then luckily, Jill's credit, she wanted him to be, a really nice guy, because Violet deserves a nice guy after what she'd been through. And luckily Chris came on and said, I like that he's a nice guy. I like that he's staying.
And he's ultimately, it's like she's gone through so much hell, and like he is, not that he's like a reward, but he kind of is, it's like in the end, like he is the guy that is going to, take care of her and protect her and never hurt her, and that's sort of like what she deserves after everything she's been through. So yeah, we liked that.
Yeah, and I think that human connection element that you mentioned in that case, I feel like you want that connection for like a date, but also I feel like ties back into the interesting darker sides of connection of technology and how people are connected. But I think ultimately at the end of the day, taking like, I guess, the tech out of it, but just being like, no, we're looking for good connections. We're looking for positive connections. We're looking for somebody who will stick around, someone who will be there through all of our crap.
Right. Yeah.
And I think what's interesting technology wise is they had been talking on DMs over this app for so long, but now she's seeing who he really is. And is he the guy that was he just putting on a front to get her on a date?
Right.
Or is this who he really was? And I think in that moment she realizes, no, he really is this good guy that I've finally let myself go on a date with, and now I have to kill him.
Decisions.
Speaking about human connections, can you talk a little bit about like how is it working together as like a screenwriting duo in that case? Like how do you share drafts back and forth? Do you work on, like, how does that process work?
Well, when we're starting something new, we'll sit down and we outline together. So that can take however long that takes, weeks maybe. But we'll sit down, we'll go for walks, just like, banging out an outline. And I think Chris will usually do the typing on that one. But once we have an outline that we're satisfied with, that we feel like is detailed enough, but still has some room to like play around, we'll split off and we'll just agree whichever section we feel comfortable starting with. And then we'll both sort of head off and do that. And then we swap those sections and do a pass on each other's pages and then just keep going from there until we have a whole draft. And then once we have that draft, we'll sit down together and just read it out loud and make changes as we go, or talk about bigger picture issues and that kind of thing.
I want to know, like, did this start as like an easy process, like working together? Was that very natural to begin with, or was it a little hard to be like, I'm going to take my creativity and merge it with your creativity? Like,
what do you think?
I mean, I think Jill's a great writer. I think she has natural talents that I don't, and she is. So I think we work really well together. I think we elevate each other's material. I think we have different skill sets. I think I can sometimes think about big picture better, but she is so good at character and dialogue and bringing.
Chris is really good at like premises and the big idea. Like it was him when we were talking about the hotel version that wasn't working. We're like, what could this be? He was the one who was like, what if it's all at a dinner on a first date, and then leading to the kill your date or I kill your kid. Like that's which the airdrops get a lot of attention, but really it's like the hook of this movie I think is is that. So yeah, Chris is really good at that. But we're married, so I think we have sort of like a shorthand and similar sensibilities, and we connected about movies, and that's sort of what drew us together too. So I think that there's just sort of a baseline there.
And I'm not trying to get into like couple therapy at the moment, but I'm curious. Like, do you find it difficult to separate like home and work then because you're working together and you're married?
I mean, we get along very well. We do.
I think it makes it convenient because it's like if one of us is I don't know, it's like I'm having a shower and then I'm like, oh, I have an idea, and then he's just like, hey, what about this? It's like makes it a little easier, or like and just at night putting our kids to bed or whatever, and then it's like, hey, what about this?
Yeah, honestly, the most difficult part is if we wrote separately, I would have meetings and she could watch the kids or do what else needs to be done, but since we have to do everything together, it's finding the time for everything from living our married life to watching our kids to writing to doing everything else that needs to be done. We sort of do everything together, so it kind of limits our time.
Yeah.
I think that's both beautiful and very sweet, and also I imagine is very difficult to try to find the time for all those various pieces of it.
It can be.
That's the hardest part, probably.
Yeah. So that kind of takes me to, how did you end up from LA to Rochester in that case? Like how did that transition happen?
Go ahead.
Well, COVID happened, and we had a small house in LA. We only had one son at the time. He was young, and at the time we were like, are we ever going to see our families again? My family's in Rochester. She has family in Boston and Columbus, and Rochester's actually kind of the halfway point. And then Zoom started happening. And, we would go to meetings, and it would take like 2 hours in traffic. And we started doing these Zoom meetings, and they'd be like, we should have just done this the whole time. It would have saved you.
It really felt like Zoom was not going away even after things got better. But it was pretty early on, I think. I mean, it was like around August of 2020 that we probably found our house in Rochester. So it wasn't that long into the pandemic that we were like, let's jump ship.
Yeah, and at the time we were like, is this crazy? Are we just locked in here and we don't know what we're doing? I mean, we'd always sort of talked about missing the seasons and being in a place that's more manageable for having kids. Because, I mean, LA is, before COVID, you'd go to a playground, it'd be so hot, there'd be literally 1,000 families there. You have to wait in line.
Any kind of family activity would just be like a nightmare.
Yeah, so I think we saw an opportunity and took a risk, and we thought maybe it would be really detrimental to our career, but
yeah, I mean, I think the writing was on the wall that Zoom was definitely going to be around for a while. And every time we came and visited here, I think we would always drive around and be like, in another life, like it'd be fun to live here. And then we saw that opportunity, but we also we were going to have another child, and that really kind of pushed things towards the edge, I think. Needing family.
Yeah. Do you think that like by starting in, not starting, but you know what I mean, but starting in LA in that case with career-wise and everything, and then like kind of putting down some roots in that case, and then from that point moving from there, did that help in that case? I am not using these terms correctly, but you get my general idea in that case, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we'd be where we are if we hadn't lived in LA for a significant amount of time. I mean, we got our opportunities because of meeting the right people in LA.
We had 2 movies come out when we were in LA too, so it's sort of we're already, had reached that point. But
we already had an agent, and we already, so I think the world started changing, but luckily we had those connections already that, made this possible. That would never have been possible if we hadn't gone to LA. Now, I'm not saying everyone has to go to LA. I think what's most important is that you're passionate about what you do and have a good story. But for us, it was great that we had and still have those roots there.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, again, what we keep going back to is like it's story, story, story. And I think in that case also you've mentioned like good collaborations in that case and like being able to work with other people as being like you've got concept, you've got like good characters, you've got the pieces of it, and then all in this case also you can build from it because you also, you know, had some tethers back in that case
Yeah.
also.
Yeah, for sure.
I will say this is a time, you know, when I first moved to LA or Jill first moved to LA, I think you really had to go to LA. Or New York City. And now I do think, you know, if someone had a great script that gets in the right hands, you don't have to be in LA to meet with a studio. They'll meet you on Zoom. And,
Yeah,
you
I do
know,
think, the Zoom part of it all probably has opened that up a bit. And, you know, putting your script out there can work if it's good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So what I feel like it's a big question, but like what's next? What are you working on from this point that you can talk about? Of course,
yeah.
You know, what's not under NDA. So
yeah. I mean, without getting into too many details, Chris had a story idea, which we really loved, and he brought to us. And so we've written a script that, you know, with his guidance that hopefully could be turned into a movie, but that's always an uphill battle. And then, you know, we have a few of our own ideas that we're working on that we've done so many things that have got made or not gotten made, like for Blumhouse for so many years that we haven't worked as much on our own ideas, that we're trying to make room for that. I mean, the thing about screenwriting, it's always an uphill battle. There's a million people who want to do it. There's, you know, you constantly have to be writing. So
everyone thinks they have a good idea.
yeah.
Well, that's one of the hard and sad things about it too is you do it and then you're done and then you have to do it again. You know, you have to start all over. So.
It's climbing a mountain and then the movie comes on. People are like, oh, cool, and then it's like, all right, now go climb that mountain.
Right. Yeah.
Do you? I mean, like in both previous works and then also with this, do you feel that sense of being like, oh, I want to revisit these characters again, like immediately? Like maybe you'll feel differently in several years or something, but like in this case, like, did you at any point like be like, I'm ready to do more with Violet already?
I mean, I don't know if Drop's gonna get a sequel, and if it did, I don't know if they would even want to continue with those characters. But I would love to write Violet and Henry sequel, just where their relationship is, and I think it'd be a fun sequel to see them actually in a relationship, and then something crazy happens.
Yeah, I mean, I always imagine Drop is a one-off, or if it had a sequel, it would be different characters in a situation with airdrops. But yeah, I mean, I think you got to be prepared to leave the characters because most movies don't get sequels. But
yeah, I think it's gotta. Yeah, you can't approach it from necessarily that hoping for that, but yeah, it's gotta just be like one good story, and then if you're lucky, yeah. But we did get to write a sequel to Truth or Dare that didn't get made, but that was a really fun one. We actually, it wasn't the same characters, but it was the same actors because it was like a meta sequel. So the actors from the first one were playing themselves. So that was like kind of our one sequel experience.
It was really fun.
It was fun.
And
it was a really fun
sort
one to
of make
write.
fun of the first movie.
Yeah,
and it was great.
And all the actors from the first movie were really great, and so we enjoyed writing in their voices and stuff. So
yeah, and that's bring it back to Chris Landon for a second. Like that's one of the things I liked about Happy Death Day to You was that it took what I liked about the first one, but kind of spun it in a new direction and gave more invigoration to the characters, by adding like a sci-fi element to it. And so I wanted to say in this case, is there like this Drop being a thriller, like working within thriller horrors? Do you feel like that's a good, like comfortable space for you, or do you want to be like, it's time for I don't know your full filmography, but do you want to do like a period rom-com in like, the UK?
I would love to try to write a comedy or rom-com of some kind, but we love horror and thrillers, and that's, again, something that we really connected on. I've always loved, those kinds of things. Like, I feel like I have memories as a kid of seeing Jaws on the TV for the first time and just like, being terrified, but it was so exciting and all that. So I've always loved those kinds of things. We both definitely, we're spooky people at heart. but yeah, I think it'd be fun to branch out and try to write a comedy or a rom-com. I really enjoyed writing the romance element of Drop and their rapport and everything. So
Yeah. And then I guess maybe my like last thread pulling from there is that in that case, so now that you've, been in Rochester for several years in that case, do we think that maybe themes, images, or even just the changing of the season may end up influencing like what you end up working on next?
probably.
Yeah. I mean, we live in Pittsford and we're always, movies are made in LA, but it doesn't have a very cinematic or very Spielbergian feel to it, right? But like Pittsford, walking around that town, it feels like a town in movies. So I think it does inspire us.
Yeah, for sure.
It like there's just so much more beauty here that we didn't get in LA that, I don't know if we're going to set a movie in Rochester, but who knows?
Yeah, but we talk all the time just about how, so much more inspiring it is and how beautiful it is here, and especially like in the fall and everything. And we've got some nice view in our backyard that just, sometimes it's just like, I can't believe we get to look at this every day.
Yeah, no, it's gorgeous. Like, again, I love this area, and love hearing about films that have local connections to here in that case. So I want to say thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you.
Jillian Jacobs,
so much.
Chris Roach, screenwriters of Drop, now playing in theaters. Hopefully we'll have one of your films at the Little Theater. We can keep having discussions about that. But thank you, everybody, so much for listening and watching to Connections here on WXXI News.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Evan Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.